Hello, everyone. I am Heather with Magnificent Mamas, and we are joined here today with author Timothy King. Timothy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for having me on. So, my name's Timothy. I am a horror author. My debut novel is coming out on March 31st. It is called Seven Rabbits. It's a home invasion slasher, is the way that I'm describing it. And it's getting some really good reviews right now. So I'm glad I'm able to get on here and talk about it a little bit.
Thank you so much. So actually, I was able to review the book as well, which was awesome. I have not read a horror book in so long, and this was like the perfect one to pick up and read. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about the book from your point of view without giving away spoilers and whatnot?
Yeah, absolutely I could. So the book essentially follows seven high school football players. And they have a tradition in this small town where football is king. It's, reigns supreme. And they go to a cabin. One of the rich kids on the team, his parents have a cabin out in the woods, and they just do this whole weekend of partying, drugs, drinking, going nuts. And while they're out there doing all this, they end up being besieged by some men wearing rabbit masks and wielding machetes. That's essentially where the story picks up and takes off. They are also a lot of back and forth in the POV between the boys who are being attacked and flashbacks to different things that have happened in the past in the history of this town. I do like to warn everybody in case, there's trigger concerns or anything like that. There are a lot of really sensitive subjects in this book. I don't know if you really want me to go into those on the podcast because some of them are, like I said, they're pretty sensitive, but definitely check it out if you're at all concerned about those kind of things.
Yes, as somebody who's read the book, I would definitely say if you have triggers or issues with certain things, I would look into that first, as it could definitely trigger some issues, so to speak. But besides that, it's amazing. I would definitely say, 18 and up?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have a 14-year-old daughter, and she has not read it, nor will she read it for quite a while.
Yeah. I was thinking my daughter's 15, and I think, she's seen a lot of stuff and read a lot of stuff, but I feel like some of that would just be a little much.
Yeah, it's pretty
And,
heavy.
and it's just, not even necessarily the graphicness per se, but like this other stuff that we don't want to mention with revealing
Yeah,
spoilers.
yeah. The topics that get addressed in the book can be pretty heavy. I
Yeah.
tried to make sure that I do anything in there that is graphic or depressing, upsetting, anything like that. I tried to do with as much tact as I could to make sure
Yeah.
that I'm not glorifying any of the or bad decisions that people make. I'm trying to dance around the issue so I don't actually say it on the
Yeah.
podcast and some of the bad things that happen. But I try to make sure that I do it with tact so it's not
Of
glorifying
course.
anything.
So before we talk a little bit more about your book, how did you get into horror writing?
That's kind of a funny story. I've been writing my entire life. Since before I even knew how to write, I would dictate stories to my grandmother, and she would type the stories up to me for me
Oh,
and
wow.
print them out for me. So those were my first stories when I was 3, 4, 5 years old, and that never really stopped. I did have a lull around my freshman, sophomore year of high school where I didn't really write much, and then my junior year, I got into creative writing, and I took a creative writing class, and I started writing. We had a horror writing prompt, and I got into that, and I started writing a horror story, and I really enjoyed it. Wrote it all the way through. Then in college and life, I had kids and
Yeah.
marriage and career. It all kind of got away from me, and I would write these short stories about sci-fi, some fantasy stuff, but always I enjoyed writing the scary or the life-threatening parts of those stories the most,
Hmm.
which is how I eventually fell into horror. And I mostly read horror anyway, so it was kind of just a perfect storm. And then I always said I was going to write a book, right? It's one of those things where one day I'm going to write a book. One of these days I'm going to do it. And
Yep.
then I had a small crisis when I turned 30. Right after I turned 30, I just sat there and looked at it and said, what the heck am I waiting for? And so I
Like a
dove
wake-up
into it.
call.
What's that?
I said kind of like a wake-up call, like, hey, do this.
Right. It is, one of those things where you can always just say, one day I'm going to do this, but why not just do it instead of saying one day? So I dove into it. This was actually not the first book that I wrote during the last year and a half or so of my writing. I actually wrote 3 other books before this that I'm still working on, but this book became such a passion project of mine that I wanted it to be my first book that I ever released. So I dove into it and worked on it night and day for 6 months or so before finally releasing.
I totally get that. I mean, you can feel it in the writing, the connection that you have with it. I feel like, I don't know if that makes sense to you, but like as somebody who writes and you love your characters and you build them and you have like the whole, every like backstory, world building, you can just, I can understand.
Yeah, this part of the reason that this one I think I poured so much myself into and I was so passionate about it is I kind of see it from all the different perspectives, right?
Yeah.
So we kind of talked about it a little bit off air, but I was a jock in high school. I played football. The main characters in here, they're jocks. And unfortunately, these jocks are not regular jocks. They make really bad decisions in the book. And that
there's a lot that are like that.
There definitely are. And these ones are definitely the extreme of those. So I had a relation to those characters. I both played and coached high school football, so I know these people. I understand them. And then also on the flip side of it, there's a lot of grief throughout the story sprinkled in for parents of different kids in the story.
Yeah.
And I'm a parent. I have 3 daughters, so I can relate to them so much. And I think that's where the connection came from, and that's why it became such an obsession for me that I had to tell this story.
I can understand that completely. As reading it, I understood once you did those little flashback type of chapters, why these men did what they did.
Right. Absolutely.
Like I get it completely, because I know my husband would do the same damn thing if it was my daughter. So.
Yep, exactly. And I this whole thing actually came around because we ran into some issues with my oldest daughter and bullying in her school and some issues that she was running into. And I didn't really feel like anybody was doing enough. So I would leave those meetings feeling frustrated and angry. And I took that idea and said, okay, what would that look like in the most extreme situation? The furthest that it can go. And that's kind of how the story escalated from there.
But it's for so many different viewpoints. It's not like, I feel like sometimes a lot of books only have like 1 or 2 viewpoints, but you're kind of showing each character's viewpoint. And it's just so, I'm trying to think of the right word, like it impacts your heart so much.
I appreciate that so much. Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I was hoping to do. That's exactly what I wanted out of it. I wanted you to feel the empathy for the characters. I wanted you to feel the dread for the other ones. I wanted you to hate them, but also understand them. And it was just, I'm hoping that I achieved that.
See, I'm not going to lie. Like at the beginning, I could not stand the jocks, and Chase, right? Yeah. I liked him.
He's our saving, our silver lining and everything. He's our most relatable guy.
As some of their stories went on, I did feel bad for the jocks, but at the same time, like some of the things that they did to cause what happened in the story just could have been avoided.
Oh, absolutely. It's 100% avoidable throughout the whole thing. And that's the tragic of it is, the tragedy is whenever you see these things, the bullying in school, most crimes in general, they can be prevented. They can be avoided if people just make 1 or 2 different decisions. If somebody shows a little bit of kindness and empathy as opposed to being a jerk. And unfortunately, we're not always thinking like that, but I wanted to kind of highlight that and emphasize that in the story as well.
And see the thing where you put how, the fathers of the football players, grew up together. They all had, most of them at least had, like one was the mayor, one was the police chief.
Yep.
Like they all had good jobs. So of course things are getting swept under the rug when they shouldn't. But in some towns, I mean, I feel like a lot of readers would definitely relate to that.
Yeah. And that's been a huge bit of feedback that I've gotten from most of my ARC readers. And funny enough, most of my ARC readers were women, and they seem to connect with it a lot. And I don't know if it's because they've all been hurt by different asshole jobs. Excuse me. Sorry. I don't know if I'm on a cuss on the podcast. Been hurt by jocks in the past, but they seem to really enjoy it and have a connection to those characters too. That's one of the things that a lot of people have brought up, is that those situations seem to get swept under the rug. Those seem to be a lot of the experiences that my readers have had with situations like this in their own lives. They were really grateful that it portrays everything in an accurate and honest way.
And it does that exactly. Like, I could see something like this happening. The sad thing is, like you said before, it's totally avoidable with just one or two decisions being made differently.
Absolutely.
So was the events just, and you might have kind of touched on this already, but inspired by any real events that you know besides the event with your daughter, or was it just?
I wouldn't say any real events. It was mostly just figments of my imagination, but I just kind of thought about what are the ways that these typical jerk men would do bad things. What are the things that they're going to do? And I was thinking of things that you would typically come across, like gaslighting, physical abuse, those different things. And I kind of tried to tie each one of those different types of issues that you're going to run into the story itself. So that's kind of where each individual situation that arises throughout the story comes from.
Yeah. Did you base any of your characters off of people you know or real life?
No, I didn't. I did notice afterwards, my wife pointed it out to me, that a couple of the characters have names similar to people that I went to high school with, but they're in no way, shape, or form based off those people. Those people were all amazing, never did anything like this. Yeah. But she pointed it out to me afterwards, and I think it must have been a subconscious thing that I did. And the names aren't identical, they're just close. Only one of the stories in there is somewhat based in reality. There is a chapter, and I'm not going to spoil it, but hopefully you'll remember this, where one of the male characters, Mikeese, he is meeting with the principal. That is actually based off a story that somebody at work told me that happened in their real life. Not those exact details, but something similar. Yeah. And that's about the extent of it. That's based in reality.
That's so horrible. And like, it's just so sad what happened to the girls, and then what happened to the boys is, it is sad. Whether, loss of life, I feel like, is sad.
It's a tragedy every time.
And, what happened, the way it happened was sad. Not saying they didn't necessarily deserve it, because that's a thin line right there, but it's tragic. It was definitely a tragic slasher.
Yeah, it runs into a thing where I wanted you to sit there at the end of it and say, was any of this really good at the end of the day? And, I hopefully trigger that thought and that conversation in your head after the book's all done.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It sure does. The book was wonderful. I would recommend it to anyone. And I know I have a little bit on Facebook being like, hey, you should read this.
I appreciate that more than I could ever tell you. We've talked about it before, but it's hard being an indie author and trying to get your work out there.
And it is. And that's why, one of the things we do is get a chance to talk to you authors on here to help promote your book and share about it. And we love reviewing books. So I was super psyched to review this book, Seven Rabbits.
I appreciate you taking the time to read it, and now the time to sit here and talk to me about it. It's really cool. I will say one thing, and I don't want to speak for every community, because the community that I'm mostly a part of is the horror community, right? Yeah. Pretty much all my interaction is in the horror community.
Yeah.
I'm sure most other book genre communities are going to be the same, but the people that I've met and the support that people give in these communities is unbelievable. I just made a TikTok video about it, because I do a lot of TikTok, and I made a video about it today, just thanking everybody, because people just pour out support for these indie authors, and it means so much to us. Like every single person that buys a book, every single person, even if you can't buy the book or don't want to buy the book, it's not your thing, just sharing, liking, watching, tweeting, whatever, it goes such a long way, and it's just amazing.
It does. And even if you can't afford to buy something, for any small business owner, whether it's, an author, because this is a small business, or a business in general, whatever, liking, sharing, commenting, like you said, it helps. Say I might not be able to buy this book, but I share about it and I, recommend it. Hey, maybe Jack over there is looking for a good horror book and is like, oh, hey, Heather just read this book, or Heather is recommending this book and knows that it's going to be great, so I'm going to go read it.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like every time somebody shares a post or makes a post about the book or reviews it, I end up with 2 or 3 more people messaging me about
Yeah.
it. So it goes such a long way. It really does.
And it launches, I know it's in pre-order right now, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yep.
And then it launches on the 31st.
Easter. Yes, ma'am. So it's kind of a play on words because it's 7 Rabbits is the title, and they wear rabbit masks, and it releases on Easter. So
That's funny. I never even thought about that.
yeah, it seemed like too good of an idea to pass up. One of my beta readers, Laura, she actually recommended it to me when I told her, because I was originally going to release it on March 1st, which is today. And she said, push it another 30 days, do it on on Easter. So that's what I went with.
That's awesome. I wouldn't have thought of that, but like, that is comical, honestly.
Yeah, I get a good kick out of it. And then I have had a bunch of people messaging me like, well, now you're ruining Easter for my family. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Because they want to read the book, and now they're going to go read the book instead of hanging out with their family. All right, that's your choice. I'm not recommending you do that, but I'm not mad about it either.
No, I'm sure you have other work in progresses. Do you have any other books coming soon?
I do, yeah. A couple different things that I do. I also narrate audiobooks.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing that I work on. I have one that's out right now on Audible, which is Mine by L.M. Kaplan.
Okay.
I highly, highly, highly recommend that one. That was my first audiobook that I ever did. Whether you're an audiobook person or just you want to read it, that book's
My
really
daughter is for sure.
okay. She would probably love that, but she might be a little young for you. You might want to just kind of check the triggers on that one too.
Yeah.
That one, it's also a horror book. It follows a man who is a recluse, and he lives with his elderly mother taking care of her all day. So he sits at his window and watches all his neighbors, and he ends up becoming obsessed with his neighbor's wife and takes that to a way too far dark place. And it's a great story, fantastic story, amazing ending. I love it. It's getting huge reviews. It's a really big hit right now within the horror community.
Yeah.
But it's a little dark, but that was my first ever audiobook narration. So that's something that was really cool. And then I've got a bunch of other ones that I'm not at liberty to talk about right now because they're not out yet. So those are my audiobook narrations that I'm working on. And then as far as books go, I have so many things in the works right now that I'm working on. I have a short story that I'm submitting next month in April to an anthology. It's a hillbilly horror anthology. Okay. So that's a short story that I'm doing there. I'm also writing a novella that I am describing as a cult horror romance, kind of a dark romance horror. Got a lot going on there. It's in a cult. That one, it's still a long ways off. I'm hoping to have it out maybe by the end of the year. I'm shooting for October, but I don't think it's going to happen. And that one follows a cult that sacrifices a woman every 13 years.
Oh, boy.
And the cult leader's son is in there, and one of the women who is potentially going to be sacrificed is his love interest. So he's in a conflicted spot. Yeah, he's in a conflicted spot between his love interest potentially being sacrificed for this cult and his father being the cult leader.
That would be rough.
Yeah, I don't know what I would do. I mean, actually, that's not true. I do know exactly what I would do, but you'll see whatever he does whenever that one gets released. And then I've got a bunch of other ones that are on the back burner right now. I've got a creature feature that I'm working on with a monster in Alaska, and that one's actually based on somewhat of a true story. There's a town in Alaska called Port Lock, Alaska, and in the 30s or so, it had a population of like 100 people, and within a couple of years, the entire town was abandoned. The official story was that it became too economically difficult to live there and thrive there. But a bunch of people who lived there came out later and said that something was in the woods hunting them and killing people in the town. So they all left.
Do we know what it was?
No idea. Then nobody ever really talked about it and said what it was. So I took that idea and fictionalized it, and that's another book that I'm working on. That's probably a mid 2025 book, if I had to guess.
I'm curious to see what you have, whether it's hunting in there or.
Yeah, it's still a long way from being done, so I'm still kind of working out the details and everything. Yeah. But I think it should be. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be less heavy and less serious than Seven Rabbits is. Yeah. Not tackle as many sensitive issues as Rabbits did. It's going to be more of just a fun monster monster thing. I think after I wrote Seven Rabbits and it was so heavy and I wrote so many dark, difficult topics to write, and then I had to sit there and read through it and re-edit it and rewrite it a million times, that I kind of wanted to write something a little more light and fun, and that's what that.
But it's still, what you're writing is still going to be kind of like a horror, darkness.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But I get where you're coming from. I'm saying it's lighter,
Yeah, it's going to be.
I get it completely.
Yeah, it's not going to just tackle as many of the difficult social issues. It's still going to be a horror. It's still going to be scary. People are still going to die. It's still going to be gruesome and gory because that's how I like my books. But it won't be as traumatizing to the reader, I don't think.
Well, I'm interested. I'm ready to read some more by you. So
absolutely, I can't wait. Maybe I can get you to beta read or ARC read some stuff in the future.
Oh, I'd love to. And I haven't really said to anyone that I would beta read for them, but for you, definitely. That's how good your book was.
I appreciate that. That means the whole world to me because it's scary to put your work out there, and you just never know how it's going to be received, and it could always go terrible. But so far, we're off to a great start. I think it's got 30 reviews roughly on Goodreads, and we're at a 4.82 rating. The last I checked.
I was thinking Goodreads, you had to leave the review after the book launched.
No, Goodreads will let you do it before the book launches, but Amazon requires it after the book.
Yeah, I knew Amazon did, but I was thinking Goodreads was the same way.
Nope. Yeah, no. You want to hear a funny story about Goodreads?
Sure.
So I'm a horror author. The stuff I write is dark. They credited my book originally to the wrong Timothy King.
Oh, no.
And the Timothy King they credited to is a guy who writes children's books.
Oh, no.
And I think they thought because it was rabbits, it must be a children's book. Something got mixed up in there. And so this poor guy's got 42 kids' books written. And then you just see all these happy-looking, colorful pictures, and then my book there with men wielding machetes. And I fought with Goodreads for like 2 weeks to get that fixed. And he didn't say anything as far as I know. He never reached out to me or anything. But I just thought that was pretty funny.
That's crazy. I'm
hoping he didn't ever notice. Maybe he didn't notice because, like I said, he didn't reach out or say anything, but you never know.
Well, is there anything else you want to share about tonight?
I don't think so. The book's available on Amazon. It's ebook, paperback pre-orders are up, and then also it's going to be on Kindle Unlimited for anybody who's got that.
Awesome.
I wanted to give it a go. I know a lot of authors lately have been kind of having some issues with KU because of the rates that they're paying the authors at, but I figured being a debut author, a new person, it'll help to get more people reading my book if they can go on there and read it on KU. So,
oh yeah, definitely.
I am also going to narrate the audiobook for it. So I'm about a quarter of the way through narrating the audiobook version of it.
When you have the audiobook done, let me know.
Okay.
So that I can get it so that when my daughter's to that point, she can listen to it.
Perfect. I love that. I can't wait to see what she thinks about it.
I think it would still, graphic wise, I don't think, she can handle that. I think, and we've discussed some of the issues the female characters have experienced.
Yeah.
But I think it would just be letting her know ahead of time, hey, this book you're going to listen to, these are some things that can happen, and to mentally prepare a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a bad idea. It's
could be, a smart idea too.
I would say if it's, depending on maturity level of the kid.
Oh, yeah.
And then I think also it'd be important for the parents to have a conversation. Like you said, just giving them the heads up and explaining that these are
why it's important to listen to too.
Yeah, these are realistic scenarios that people deal with.
And you need to know how to handle scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, 15, 16 years old, that's probably an okay age, depending on maturity level and how the parents feel about it.
Yeah.
I definitely wouldn't go any younger than that. That would really be pushing it. Yeah.
The only reason I said my daughter would, because, we homeschool. She's more advanced in some ways than some other kids her age and has more knowledge about some things, for instance.
Yeah.
But
that makes sense. That's perfectly fair. I think in that situation as a parent, if you think she can handle it, I would definitely, it'd be a good book for her to read. Like you said, these are unfortunately realistic scenarios that people face, and maybe not the machete wielding madmen and rabbit mask. That was, definitely a horror thing, but
yes,
a whole lot of the other stuff going on.
I mean, who doesn't love horror though? I do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a horror buff. I love it.
She's over there raising her hand too.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will kind of compare it to Strangers or Your Next, the two movies. So if you guys are comfortable with that kind of stuff, that's kind of along the same vein. There's some other stuff in there too, obviously, but those are good comparisons to kind of give people an idea of what.
I agree completely. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and let everyone know we'll have his social media and links to purchase or pre-order, in this case, the book, in the comments and in our posts and stuff. So make sure to follow him and check out his book. And do you have anything else you want to add real quick?
Nope, I am good. I really appreciate you taking the time and helping me out.
Of course, that's what we do.